Yeah, 50 years later, and the Buffalo Springfield still have it right. Something sure is happening here, and what it is ain't exactly clear. And Retake Our Democracy in its blog and in the show tries to shed light on what's happening and what you may be able to do about it. Good morning. You're listening to Retake Our Democracy. It's a radio show that airs on KSFR at 8:30 a.m. each Saturday morning. And KSFR is your public radio station here in Santa Fe, but this show also airs throughout the state on our podcast. I'm Paul Gibson, the host of Retake Our Democracy, and today we're going to have a conversation with Senate Pro-Tem-elect Mimi Stewart. She was one of the panelists on our Zoominar last Tuesday, along with Senator Worth and Speaker Eagle. But today we'll get to find out a bit more about Senator Stewart, her background, her legislative priorities, and how her selection as the pro-tem has unfolded. Last week, it was just Roxanne and I, as we went over the Retake Our Democracy 2021 legislative strategy and the bills we'll be supporting in the next session. If you missed that conversation, or if you're driving around town right now and you don't catch all of our interview with Senator Stewart, all of our past shows are available by podcast at retakeourdemocracy.org. Hover over the actions and events menu and go to Retake Conversations, and you'll see all of our conversations dating back to February of this year. Prior to that, all of the others going back 4 years, those can be found at ksfr.org. Before we get started with Senator Stewart, just a couple of brief announcements. Thanks to one of our board members, Miguel Acosta, we've been informed of an action taking place in Albuquerque that I want to share with you. The Mountain View Neighborhood Association and Mountain View Community Action, along with representative petitioners Laura Silva and Nora Garcia, have filed a petition last week to the Albuquerque Bernalillo County Air Quality Control Board, asking for a hearing regarding the permitting of a proposed hot mix asphalt plant, which is slated to be built at 9615 Broadway Southeast. The petition was filed just before Thanksgiving holiday. The City of Albuquerque Environmental Health Department issued a permit for the New Mexico Terminal Services to build the asphalt plant on October 26, in spite of the land being currently zoned A1 for agricultural use only. As far as I know, asphalt is not agriculture. The co-petitioners, represented by the New Mexico Environmental Law Center, claim that the permitting of this asphalt is discrimination against residents of the Mountain View neighborhood, a community that has already borne the brunt of polluting industry in Bernalillo County. Mountain View is located southeast of Albuquerque between Rio Grande River and I-25. A friend of mine, Marla Painter, is a member of Mountain View Community Action, and she commented, quote, "Currently, the Environmental Health Department permits an unlimited amount of polluting industry in our neighborhood without regard for human health. There is a dangerous concentration of unhealthy industrial activity adjacent to this community, and that has existed for a long time, and the industry activity is uncool. It is just not okay to have a Democratic House, Democratic Senate, Democratic governor, Democratic mayor in Albuquerque, and a Democratic state land commissioner, and still be needing to organize to protect the air in a largely residential community on land that is zoned for agriculture. Because state regulators and county regulators routinely approve permits for such things. The same process is going on in South Santa Fe with another asphalt plant seeking to expand operations in a low-income residential community. And again, the New Mexico Environmental Law Center is representing those constituents. If you want more information on both of these situations, hover over our actions and events menu and click on asphalt. And we have more info and contact info and speaking points for how you can raise your voice. I also want to remind you that Retake has a 2021 legislative strategy and 15 transformational bills, 28 priority bills for which we are advocating. And we've started the advocacy work the day after the general election. Our strategy is to use December to organize constituent teams in each of the 27 democratically controlled Senate districts and then for constituents to reach out to the senators to conduct Zoom conversations about the bills we support. So senators will be talking with their constituents. We want to find out in December where support for our bills is strong and where some senators may need some good information on the bills we support. You don't have to be a policy wonk or even to have experience advocating with the legislature to do this and to do it effectively. Retake provides tools, scripts, and information on all our bills. And if you were on our Zoom with Democratic leadership on Tuesday, you heard Senator Worth indicate that he felt the time was now for passing really meaningful legislation, and we want to make sure we take advantage of this opportunity. The need is great, but so is the opportunity. All we need is your voice. If you're interested in more information on this work, just write us at retakeresponse@gmail.com. We had a strategy meeting yesterday on Zoom and are holding them every Friday in December at 3:30. We'd love to have you in on those calls. So that's enough announcements. Let's chat with Senator Stewart. Good morning.
Good morning, Paul.
So I always like to allow our guests to introduce themselves. So can you tell us just a bit about you and how you wound up in the New Mexico State Senate? We'll get into your path to the Pro-Tem position in a bit.
All right, well, thank you, Paul, and thank you for inviting me today to talk to your listeners. I appreciate that. So I moved to New Mexico in 1978, 42 years ago. I was raised mostly in the Southwest, Arizona and Colorado. My mother was raised in Arizona and New Mexico. Her father was an engineer for the railroad. So she moved us to Colorado. That's where I spent my formative years from 2nd grade to 12th grade. After that, I lost my mother and was really on my own. So I cobbled together money for college, went to Boston University, followed a high school sweetheart out there. That didn't work out, but at least I got a good education.
I did the same thing. And it didn't work out either.
So got my master's degree in education from Wheelock College, which then was an independent college, just education, and they've now been subsumed by Boston University. So even my master's degree is now from Boston University. So moved here 42 years ago and started working for the public schools almost immediately. And was very involved in organizing with the union, Albuquerque Teachers Federation. Came out for 3 years from teaching and worked for Albuquerque Teachers Federation and started lobbying. That's when I saw, wow, look at this legislature. They don't even understand the funding formula. People who've been here for 20 years can't talk to me about funding education because they don't understand the funding formula. So that was an eye-opener for me. And then in '92, I actually ran for office. I was asked to run for office by 4 state senators. That didn't work out, but 2 years later, I ran for the House. Still teaching, so served in the House for 20 years. And then 6 years ago, my state senator, Tim Keller, was elected as auditor. And I joined 12 other people trying to worm my way into a state senate nomination, and I was successful. So I've been in the state senate since January 2015.
Okay. I read that in the New Mexican that you had a pretty traumatic childhood. And how has that experience and your experience as a special ed teacher informed your legislative priorities?
Well, I did have a very traumatic childhood. My mother took her own life when I was 17. That took about 40 years of therapy to get over. I don't think you ever ever lose the grief from a parent who kills themselves, especially since she blamed all her daughters for it. Um, so um, my father died when I was quite young in a car accident. I had a really terrible stepfather who was the reason I had such a terrible childhood. Um, but, you know, that's a long time ago. And it just taught me that I had to, it made me very independent. And the experience of living with an abuser like my stepfather really taught me how to be in a coalition with others against an evil person, my siblings. And so my siblings and I continue to be very close to this day. But I was often the mediator for some reason. I just stuck my neck out with my stepfather and tried to keep him from abusing us so much. So I kind of learned how to focus anger on one person that was responsible for all the abuse. So I think those skills, you know, it's not what you want to learn when you're a kid,
Right, right.
but it's certainly what I did learn. The other thing was that school was just so important because there were adults that liked me and thought I was a good student and that I was worth something, something I wasn't getting at home. And so I just threw myself into schoolwork. It's why I became a teacher. And and the aspect of being a special ed teacher is got me to work with families and children from families with the same abuse I had when I was a kid. So I've just learned resiliency. I've learned how to mediate. I've learned how to stand up for myself. I've learned how to not take no for an answer, and I've learned how to sort out from adults their childhood trauma and how that changes them for, you know, mostly these elected officials I serve with. It gives me more insight into why they do what they do.
Okay, okay. You also mentioned in the New Mexican that you first got to the Roundhouse as a state rep, and you were a tad impatient and perhaps even a little bit abrasive. I don't know if that was the term you used in the interview in the New Mexico, but that over time you adopted a kind of more collegial approach and sought to find more common ground than points of division. I can certainly understand this. I mean, you got elected, come to the Roundhouse ready to make things happen. And then I can imagine you ran into a male dominated legislature that probably wasn't all that open arms for you. Can you talk a bit about that experience and what precipitated your shift in how you negotiated some difficult terrain?
Well, it's, you know, as a teacher, uh, I feel it's very important to remain a lifelong learner. That's what you try to teach students, how to become lifelong learners. And so this is my 26th year, the end of my 26th year in the legislature. And I've just tried to find all kinds of ways to learn my craft better. And it was really Mac's call early in the House that said to me, look, I've still got the note he sent me saying all of this. You know, you're smart, you know what you're doing, you have good ideas, but you get too angry. And I did. I just thought, well, why doesn't everybody want to improve the schools, raise teacher salaries, work on getting rid of the gangs in our districts? I didn't listen as well to other people. I've learned to listen. I've learned to understand that I don't always have all the answers, and sometimes my answers are not the best answers. And other people want to improve the state. they may think they have a better idea than I do.
Mhm.
So I've learned to uh, uh, I've learned to listen. I've learned to understand where other people are coming from. And I've also learned that humor is much more fun than anger. So I've really tried to expand being able to use humor, um, joking, a little self-deprecation, um, and the solid relationships that you develop with this work only helps that. When people understand me better, when I understand them better, we have a better chance of coming together and compromising. I've
You know,
just
it's
learned to be
interesting you
more
said that.
pragmatic.
It's interesting you said that because a legislator pulled me aside a couple years ago saying, I had pretty much given a negative post in our blog about Patty Lundstrom. And he said to me, you never know when you're going to need her. And so you might want to try and learn a little more diplomacy in how you write about the legislature. And that really made a difference in my, so it's these people who come into your life and can really have an impact. Um, I want to remind our listeners that it is in times like these that KSFR is more important than ever, offering timely news and alerts and a wide range of programming to keep you sane while holed up at home. So for those of you who can afford it, this is Giving Week. Please consider making a contribution and think of it as your ticket for admission to a lot of great programming on KSFR. You can go to ksfr.org, click on the donate button, and there you go, you'll make your contribution. Today, I'm talking with Senator Mimi Stewart, and I recognize that legislators like to try and keep caucus conversations and decisions internal, but it is no secret that for many Democrats, the primary was a campaign focused on changing the composition of the Senate. And a big part of that was to ensure different leadership on some key Senate committees. So there's a great deal of interest in the Pro-Tem selection, and congratulations there. Can you tell us a bit about the actual selection process and how it works? And then what goes into your selecting committee chairs and members? You must be a very popular senator right now, Everybody wants to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm popular right now, and pretty soon I'm going to be unpopular. So there were 5 senators vying for the pro tem position. I did not begin to run for the pro tem position until the general election was over. I was in charge of our reelection along with Peter Worth, and I was working on 14 races. I did not feel like it was even ethical to start running for pro tem when I was helping everybody get elected. So I started late, and 4 other people had already been talking to people, but essentially I spent 2 weeks calling up everyone, laying out why I thought I could do a good job and asking for support. And so we had 3 rounds of voting. Senators are very independent. The majority of people would not tell me if they would support me or not. I mean, they said nice things. Oh, you would be good. I had one person say to me, well, you're not my first choice, but you're not my last choice. Was a little shocked. But it's very competitive, and it's competitive because of the ability of the pro tem to set the chairs, vice chairs, and the committee membership. So, and when I ran, I told everyone, I am not promising anybody anything. I'm just not. I don't do it. I don't work like that. So now, of course, I've got 6 weeks of interviewing everyone, talking to them. The budget committee has got to be more transparent and open. And I have to find out, I have to find a person who will make those changes. And so I'm
Okay.
going to be interviewing them all about how would you change the committee to make it more accessible to more ideas, because right now all they focus on is the budget, that's it, and they're done. And there's many other committees in the Senate that are working on issues that will require funding. And I just want to have us be more unified. I want to have everybody in the Senate be able to say why the budget is the way it is, and to have access for changes to the budget. Now, that's a lot of work, and I'm not going to get there soon. People are not happy about that, but it's the only way I feel like I can do it fairly, so that I try to find every senator spot that they want to be. I've had 8 requests for chair of the Senate Finance Committee. So that's at least 7 people I'm going to disappoint.
Well, you can give one of them vice chair anyway.
Oh, no, there's a few requests for vice chair. So that's probably 6 people I'm really going to disappoint. But I'm trying to do it in such a way that so that people know why it's being done like that. I'm trying to do it with the other leaders rather than just being an autocratic person. But we have such great new senators. These committees are going to change just by their election and by the changes that we will make to leadership.
Okay. Retake has pressed for a number of bills that never were heard in committee. During the Zoominar, for example, you mentioned that you didn't know much about local choice energy since it hadn't been heard really in any committees. The same could be said about a number of other energy bills. It's no secret that sometimes committee chairs sit on bills that they personally don't want to advance. Of course, we would advise our members to write and call committee chairs when our bills are stuck. But does it serve, is it effective also to reach out to the whip and the Pro-Tem and Senate Leader Worth and ask them to, like, hey, can you talk to whoever? And this bill's been sitting here for 2 weeks and it's not going to get through if it doesn't get into a committee hearing. What is the best way to advocate to get bills through?
Well, the absolutely best way is for you to lobby your own legislator.
Right.
Everybody has 2 of them. So that's item number 1, is get to know and write letters or call or email or text your own legislator.
Right.
And secondly, then to focus on the committee where the bill is that you want to be heard. But also reaching out to leadership is also a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
We're really going to try to have a robust plan when we get to January. We are doing things differently now. While we have a month and a half, we're meeting in small groups to try to have a robust platform for the Senate Democrats. I don't like either when a chairman doesn't hear a bill, keeps it from being heard for whatever reason. The chairs do have a lot of control over those committees. Somebody's got to. That's why we name people. So I think it's the election of 7 brand new senators, all of whom are coming in with experience and knowledge about the changes that they want, that is going to change every committee. I think the organizing we're doing right now to have a plan for bills we've got to pass, and that understanding among the whole caucus working together is going to diminish some of what's happened in the past with bills just sitting in committees forever.
Okay. Well, let's shift gears just a bit and talk legislation. We'll talk a bit about some of Retake's legislative priorities in a bit, but first, can you just tell us what are your legislative priorities? Will you be sponsoring any legislation in 2021, or Are there bills that you're feeling are especially important to you?
Well, Paul, I have been working on legislation for a while before I even decided to run for pro-tem. I think it's best if the pro-tem doesn't do as much legislation as I'm known to do. I'm one of the people that does a lot of bills. I have bills that it's taken me 2, 3, 4 years to finally pass. My continuation of the solar tax credit is an example of that. That's finally done. My wildlife trafficking bill and wildlife corridors act, that took several years. So the ones that I'm working on now are education related. So we just have issues now in our public schools with what they've had to do this year. We've lost a number of kids. Our education budget is based on the number of students you have in the previous year. So all of our districts are afraid about that cliff. So I'm working on legislation to keep that from happening. I'm working on other education bills and issues that are a little bit more esoteric. I'm working on a climate change bill that I think may be, if I can use this word, trumped by other climate legislation that's being thought of, but this would create a plan. It would bring in 6 state agencies to create a plan to move us away from reliance on fossil fuels. So we have a number of bills like that that we're all working on. I think being a pro-tem, I just have to know what's happening and know where we've got gaps. We're all working on tax reform. We have got to diversify our economy. We cannot continue to have this boom and bust with oil and gas and the destruction it's creating in our environment. So we have to deal with both of those issues. I was going to do one of those tax reform bills. If somebody else is already thinking of it, I may give it to them, but it was a redo of the corporate income tax structure that got so ruined under Governor Martinez. So education, we want to do another COVID bill. We want to look at minimum wage again. We want to look at having sick leave for people. This pandemic and the Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement, that's really shown us where our government needs to go. We need to look at everything from a racial equity lens, and we're going to try to do that more. So I have a couple of other bills, but overall, I'm really trying to focus on trying to get a package through the Senate caucus that reflects our new people and issues with our climate, with healthcare, with broadband needs a lot of work, with and other issues that will help us with our diversifying our economy, like adult use cannabis. So it's just kind of a lot of organizing that I'm doing right now to make sure we don't drop the ball on anything.
Okay. Well, we're about out of time for the radio show, but we have a couple more questions to cover, and we'll do that on our podcast. And so I just want to let our listeners know, not sure exactly who will be on next week. I'm talking with Representative Ferrari, with Representative Lundstrom, a number of other legislators to see who and we're going to just be lining legislators up one week after the next through the next session. And so I want to thank Mimi Stewart for being with us today. And like I said, and like I always say, stay healthy, stay hopeful, and most of all, stay active. It's the only way we fix this mess. And we'll be back next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay. Okay, by the miracle of podcast, we're back. And now I can be a little more casual. And so I was going to ask you, I think it's on your end that you have something that beeps every once in a
I
while,
know, I'm trying to fix that.
and it's surprisingly piercing on the
Really? Oh, so like
there.
there, right?
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
I think
I always
it's
turn
gonna
off
be.
my Bluetooth when I do these things because if the phone rings, it goes really loud on my computer. And so maybe it's your Bluetooth, but um, we'll forge on. It's not as big a deal on the radio, on the podcast. People will forgive us. Um, I'm heartened to hear that you are so supportive of increasing. Yeah, I heard this on the podcast. I mean, on the Zoominar, that you're interested in increasing the permanent funds going to early childhood education. And given the Yazzie decision, it does make sense to expand that distribution of funds to K-12, and also that could address longer term, not immediately, but longer term, the K-12 inequities that the Yazzie case highlighted. But Representative Martinez and Maestas were seeking a 1% increase just for early childhood. Would you support increasing the allocation to 1.5% or 2% so it could cover both early childhood and K-12?
So let me tell you why that's somewhat problematical, and it relates back to why this has not passed before. About 15 years ago, I know this because I've looked in my files lately, we were getting about $250 million from the Land Grant Permanent Fund to going into education. This year,
Good or
we're getting
K-12?
about K-12,
Okay.
K-12. This year, we're getting over 800 million. And that's because we only take out 5% and the fund continues to grow. So it's big, it's a huge fund now. But if you take 2% out, yeah, at first, your distribution is that much more. And then the distribution goes down because the fund itself is going down. So we'd have to look at the numbers. I've already looked at the numbers for a 1%. It doesn't really start impacting the fund for 10 to 15 years. But then 40 years out, it's 350 million less in distribution. So you always have to look at what really will happen to these funds. So, for now we can take out a little bit, but if we take out more than that, we really damage the distribution as the fund over time. So you have to protect that distribution because it really is, if you count the distribution to the land grant colleges, the School for the Blind, the School for the Deaf, the Carrie Tingley Hospital, New Mexico Military Institute, our land grant colleges, they get about 18% of the fund, and about 82 to 85% K-12. If you count all of that this year, it's $1 billion being distributed. But if you bring that fund down, you bring down the distribution. It's just the way it works. So we'll have to look at that to see what we can do.
Okay. From the Zoominar on Tuesday night, it was clear that Democratic leadership wants to see bill language before weighing in on bills that are going to be introduced for the first time. But there are some bills that are not new at all. And I'm wondering, where do you stand in relation to the Health Security Act? We've now had 3 independent reports on that system of healthcare that show that it would save New Mexico money. And if COVID has taught us anything, it's taught us that having healthcare coverage predicated on employment is not necessarily a good thing. Are you prepared to vote for and push for the HSA?
I've always voted for it when I had the chance, and it's been around for so long. It was Max Paul and Lucky Varela when I got into the House. So the studies that are coming back have extremely divergent amounts that they think it will cost. We need to find the real number in the middle. You know, I support Medicaid for all, Medicare for all, but what I really want to know is what Biden, Harris, and the Congress is going to do with the Affordable Care Act. Because if they would do a public option really makes the case for the Health Security Act. So it kind of depends on if we can get a better amount, a better funding estimate for what that would really cost, and also to look to see what Congress will do to improve the Affordable Care Act and put in a public option. We absolutely need to deal with healthcare costs. It's outrageous. And in the public schools, we'll give a minor 2 or 3% cost of living. It goes away because the health insurance goes up every year. So I've long been a proponent of a single payer system. So however we can get there is where I'm at.
Okay. Well, COVID has also exposed how vulnerable low-income populations are to unscrupulous predatory lenders. And we spoke about this bill also on Tuesday night, but within the caucus, will you be persuading your fellow Democrats to reduce the legal loan limit to 36%? I mean, is that something that's a really high priority for you?
It's not a higher priority than a lot of the other bills we've already been talking about. I actually had a bill to do that, not once, but twice when I was in the House. And the representative you mentioned earlier, Representative Lundstrom, got her bill passed and mine got killed. So yeah, we've got to rein in.
One of the reasons I wanted to get Representative Lundstrom on the radio show.
Well, she'll promote that 175% amount that I don't think I voted for that. It was so ridiculous, or maybe I did because at least it reined them in somehow. But no, I mean, Georgia has a 36% cap on payday lenders. The payday lenders say, if you do that, we'll all leave town. Well, I say good riddance, but they still are part, and especially now with COVID, people have used them more. So yeah, we need to rein that in.
So a lot of these things are impacted by COVID. I think COVID shined a light on just how vulnerable our essential workers are. And so one of the other things that I know the Working Families Party is pushing for, and so are we, is paid sick leave. Is that a bill you'll be supporting? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. We've got to get that done. And I know businesses complain about it, but really the bills that I've seen are just very reasonable. They're at a minimum, 1 hour of sick leave for every 30 hours of work. So that's one of them. So yeah, we need to do that. We've got to get better. We've got to help our essential workers, our lowest paid workers with so many ways. A minimum wage increase, sick leave. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's really shown, this pandemic has really shown so many more inequities in our daily life, and we have to address those.
Okay. We got 2 more questions. And one thing I've always wondered about, and I write about this a lot, is that low-income rural voters have many of the same social, health, and economic challenges as urban voters. And why are Democrats unable to convey how supporting Democratic candidates would be in the best interest of most rural New Mexicans? Is there something wrong with the way we campaign there? I mean, I realize they're more conservative, but they're more conservative and it's not in their best interests in many ways.
Boy, Paul, if I had the answer to that, I would be queen for a day. It's just a huge issue, and I've been talking about it for the last several days. It might be the language we use. It might be the language that the other side uses that people just believe. I mean, they, they, it's just tough. And, you know, thank goodness we've had a governor that has tried to rein in the pandemic, but she's angered a lot of the rural areas with the necessity for what she had to do.
Right.
And getting them to understand it is just, it would be so much more helpful if the rhetoric from the Republican side was more helpful, because it's just not helpful. And so
it's
a
100 times worse on a national level, but it's, you know,
yes.
Steve Pierce kind of can almost be as bad as Trump.
Yeah, that filters down into our state. What happens nationally filters down into our state, and Steve Pierce has not helped at all.
Yeah, and the rhetoric of late, I mean, I don't know if you saw any of Trump on his 41-minute rant on Facebook. It's getting scary. I mean, he's just like provoking people to all kinds of things. They were, I can't remember the state, but in one of the states where the election was being contended, there've been calls to execute all the voting administrators and so forth. It's like,
yeah, that's Georgia. Yeah, there's a call to kill the voter administrators in Georgia.
Yeah, yeah. All right, last question. Can you tell us of any bills of which you are aware that support specifically indigenous, tribal, or rural communities, specifically indigenous communities? Certainly many of the bills we're supporting will benefit indigenous communities, whether it's the Health Security Act, funding for early childhood, sick leave, and so forth. But are there any specific bills that address tribes and pueblos that you're aware of? And as a follow-up to that, are you also aware of either a lobbyist or organization that spearheads indigenous advocacy in the legislature?
Well, one bill that Senator Bill O'Neill is offering is a requirement that every bill would have to basically go through this kind of a lens, a racial justice lens. What does it do to impacted communities? What does it do for racial, economic, gender equity issues? So I'm really interested in that, and I'm hoping we can pass that. Senator Linda Lopez is part of the governor's task force on racial equity, and she's going to be giving a presentation to the Senate caucus this weekend about what has come from that commission and what bills we might be looking at. So we're definitely talking about this in our meetings, and we are trying to think about these kinds of things that have come up with COVID. I talk about it in a way, it just looks like there's a big scab torn off of our whole country when we're talking about racial issues, justice issues, indigenous people issues. So it's just more in our conversation, and we're thinking about it more, and we will be looking at it more when bills come up.
Okay. Well, thank you for this conversation, Senator Stewart. You know, I spent the last 4 years when the Roundhouse was an in-person event, and I was there pretty much, 8 to 6 every day, and I didn't really get a chance to interact with you very much. It's just one of those things. Maybe things weren't in your committee or what have you, but it's been great between the Zoominar that we just did and this conversation. It's great to get to know you better, and I appreciate your perspective, and we'll have your back.
Right.
You're
well,
gonna
right back at you, Paul. I haven't been able to meet you, so I really appreciate the opportunities, and let's continue talking.
And when you have 6 senators mad at you, maybe we'll have your back on that. We have a favorite there. But we best not, I'll tell you, but I'll tell you offline. We're ending the,
That's not, everybody's telling me their favorite